Some families don't destroy each other with knives. They do it with a phone call that sounds like a verdict. A father declares he's dead, and you get nothing while a mother laughs like she just won a bet. And the target isn't just money, it's dignity, identity, and the right to belong in your own bloodline. There's a saying here, the truth doesn't need to shout, it needs receipts. So when family turns reality into a power play, is the move to stay quiet for the sake of a fake peace, or stay calm long enough to drag the truth into the light at the exact right moment. Before we dive into today's story, let us know where you're tuning in from. It's always incredible to see how far these stories travel. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss what happens next in this journey. Now, let's listen to him from the heart. Some families don't destroy each other with knives. They do it with a phone call that sounds like a verdict. A father declares he's dead, and you get nothing while a mother laughs like she just won a bet. And the target isn't just money, it's dignity, identity, and the right to belong in your own bloodline. There's a saying here, the truth doesn't need to shout, it needs receipts. So when family turns reality into a power play, is the move to stay quiet for the sake of a fake peace, or stay calm long enough to drag the truth into the light at the exact right moment. Before we dive into today's story, let us know where you're tuning in from. It's always incredible to see how far these stories travel. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss what happens next in this journey. Now, let's listen to him from the heart. My phone buzzed at 7:12 a.m. That thin hour when the world still feels half asleep and bad news slips in easier because your brain hasn't finished building its defenses. The caller ID read Dad, Wade Rook. I stared at it a beat longer than normal, not because I was afraid of the call, but because I'd learned what my father's early morning calls really were. Not check-ins, not concern, verdicts. When my dad called this early, it meant one of two things: he needed something, or he was about to announce something like it was already settled, already stamped, already irreversible. Either way, he didn't call to talk. He called to place you where he wanted you. I answered on the second ring. Hello. His voice came through flat and cold, like he'd practiced it in the mirror until it sounded clean. Grandpa died last night, he said. Funeral Friday. He left us everything. You get nothing. For a second, my body didn't do what it should have done. No inhale, no exhale. Like my lungs were waiting for permission. Then I heard it soft at first, then brighter, like someone couldn't help themselves. My mother. Celeste's laugh floated in the background, not the kind you make when you're nervous or in shock. It was light, sharp, a little delighted, like she'd been holding it in. Then she leaned close enough to the phone that she knew I'd hear every syllable. Finally, you're out. I could have argued. I could have asked questions. I could have demanded to know what happened, what time, what hospital, what doctor, what paperwork. I could have done what they expected me to do: break open, plead, scramble, give them the satisfaction of seeing me destabilized. That's what my parents always counted on. That if they hit hard enough, I'd react loud enough for them to point and say, "See, he's the problem. He's always been the problem." I'd been wearing that label for years: unstable, difficult, dramatic. The kind of words that let people dismiss you without dealing with the facts. The kind of words that stick because they're hard to disprove in a family that's already decided who gets to be believed. So I didn't give them that. I looked down at my kitchen table and I pressed one button. Speaker. Then I set the phone down in the center of the table like it was a microphone in a courtroom. Not because I wanted the whole neighborhood to hear. Because I wasn't alone. Grandpa Gideon Rook sat right next to me, alive, elbows, relaxed hands wrapped around his coffee mug like nothing on earth could move him unless he chose to move. He didn't look confused. He didn't look fragile. He looked ready. His skin was thinner than it used to be, veins standing up on the backs of his hands, but his grip was steady. His eyes were calm in that way that doesn't come from not understanding what's happening. It comes from understanding it too well. In front of him on the table was a thick sealed envelope. Not decorative, not sentimental. The paper was heavy, the kind lawyers use when they want a document to feel like it has weight before you even read it. There was attorney letterhead stamped in the corner and my name, my full name, written in neat, careful handwriting across the front. The seal wasn't a flourish. It was the kind that cracks when you break it. Evidence, not emotion. Beside the envelope sat a plain manila folder. Nothing dramatic about it. No labels screaming for attention. Just a thin folder, the kind you carry when you don't need theatrics because the paper inside can speak for itself. My dad kept talking, growing bolder in the space my silence gave him. "You thought you were smart," he said, as if this was a lesson he'd been waiting to teach. "Cutting us off trying to be independent. Now it doesn't matter. The house, the accounts, the land, everything is ours." In the background, my mom made a sound, half laugh, half scoff, like she was enjoying the way he said ours. I watched Grandpa's face closely, waiting for the flicker of surprise or grief or rage. It didn't come. Not the way you'd expect. There was only a small tightening near his jaw, like he was marking each sentence the way a judge marks a lie. My mother leaned closer again, sweetening her tone the way she always did when she wanted cruelty to sound like reason. "Come to the funeral," she said. "Or don't. Either way, you're not family anymore. Not family anymore." Like family was something they could revoke, like a membership card, like I hadn't been born into it, like I hadn't spent my whole life trying to earn a seat at a table that was always set for someone else. I kept my breathing slow on purpose. I let the call timer keep running in the corner of the screen like a quiet witness. 7:13, 7:14. Proof that this wasn't a nightmare. Proof that this was recorded in time. Grandpa's gaze moved from my phone to that sealed envelope. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. He tapped the seal once with his fingertip, just one quiet tap, as if reminding himself there was a line they hadn't read yet. My father's voice sharpened. "Are you even listening?" I kept my voice steady. One sentence. Nothing more. "I'm listening." He exhaled like he was disappointed I wasn't crying. "Good. Then you'll do the right thing and stay away from the attorney's office. We've already handled it." Handled it. That word hit my stomach in a way I didn't like. Because in my father's mouth, handled meant paperwork. Signatures. Permissions. It meant someone being cornered when they were too emotional to read what they were signing. And it meant systems, banks, offices, portals being nudged into motion by someone who knew exactly where the buttons were. My mom laughed again. "If there's anything worth sending, we'll send it," she said, like my life could fit in a box. I stayed silent. Not because I didn't have words, because silence was a strategy. If they thought I was frozen, they'd keep talking. And every sentence they added was another thread Grandpa could pull later. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Grandpa shift slightly toward the phone, slow, deliberate, like a man deciding a door was about to close. He looked at me just 1 second. A question, without words. "Are you ready to stop being the target and start being the witness?" I nodded once. Grandpa lifted the sealed envelope, held it up at eye level, angled toward me like he was reminding me it existed for a reason. Then he set it back down and placed 2 fingers on the manila folder. He didn't open either one. He just listened. My father kept going the way he always did when he believed he was giving orders to someone who had no options. "Don't cause problems," he said. "You'll embarrass yourself. It's done." Grandpa's expression didn't change, but his thumb slid the envelope a fraction closer to the phone, like he was positioning it for the exact moment it would matter. And that's when it landed in my chest, clear as a bell. This call wasn't only an insult. It was a signal. A green light. They thought Grandpa was gone. They thought whatever they'd handled was already in motion. They thought the story was written. But Grandpa was sitting right beside me, alive and calm, with legal paper on my kitchen table like a loaded weapon nobody else knew existed. I looked at his face, expecting anger. What I saw was something colder and more controlled than anger. Patience. The kind of patience that doesn't wait for things to get better. The kind that waits for the right moment to close a trap. My dad's voice cut through the speaker again, impatient now. "Are you going to say something?" He wanted a reaction. Anything he could shape into a narrative, later proof that I was unstable, irrational, emotional. That I didn't deserve to be taken seriously. I gave him nothing but the truth. "I'm listening." And then Grandpa moved. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just a slight lean toward the center of the table, toward the phone, toward the performance my parents were putting on like it was already a victory speech. Grandpa's voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. He said one word, clean, calm, sharp enough to split the room open. Hello. On the other end of the line, the laughter stopped so abruptly it felt like someone cut the audio with scissors. For 2 full seconds there was nothing. No mocking, no fake sympathy, no commands. Just silence and the faint crackle of a phone connection trying to hold up the weight of what had just happened. Then my father's voice came back thin, disbelieving. Dad. My mother didn't speak right away. I could hear her breathing short, sharp inhales like she was trying to decide whether to panic or perform. Grandpa didn't give her time to choose. I heard everything he said, the same tone he used when he taught me how to do things right the first time. Every word. My father snapped into recovery mode, talking too fast, like speed could rebuild control. Dad, this is a misunderstanding. We got a call. They said no, Grandpa cut in. 1 syllable firm as a stop sign. You didn't say you got a call. My father went quiet. Grandpa paused just long enough for the truth to breathe. You said you got everything. My mother slid in, then sweet as syrup over broken glass. Dad, thank God. We were so scared. We thought you laughed, Grandpa said. 1 sentence, 1 fact. It landed harder than any accusation. My mother's sweetness cracked. That wasn't, I'm sitting here. Grandpa continued, calm and unshakable, at your grandson's kitchen table, with a sealed envelope from my attorney. My father's tone shifted from theatrical to urgent. Why are you with him, he demanded. He's been poisoning you against us. I felt my jaw tighten. Poisoning. That word was always their favorite because it let them frame me as a contaminant instead of a person. Grandpa's eyes met mine for a beat. Then he looked back at the phone like he was speaking to strangers, not family. I'm with him, he said, because I knew you'd try something the moment you thought you could. My stomach tightened, not from fear, from recognition. Grandpa wasn't guessing. He was confirming. My father tried volume next, the way he always did when logic failed. Are you even thinking clearly, he snapped. Do you know what day it is? Grandpa didn't flinch. It's Tuesday, he said. And at 7:12 this morning you called and told him I was dead. He let that sit. Then he added, steady and precise, and you told him to stay away from my attorney's office. My mother's voice sharpened. We said that because he causes problems. He shows up and makes scenes. Grandpa's tone stayed flat. He shows up with documents, huh? That's what you're afraid of. My father made a sharp sound, half cough, half choke, like the air had turned on him. Grandpa didn't argue morality. He didn't say, how could you? He didn't beg them to remember love. He asked a procedural question. Why did my bank receive a death notification request at 6:48 a.m., he said. I felt my pulse spike. I turned toward him so fast my chair squeaked. I hadn't known that, not even a hint. My father answered with a stunned, what, like he'd genuinely hoped Grandpa couldn't see past the phone call. Grandpa slid the manila folder toward himself and opened it for the first time. Inside was a single printed page with a bank logo at the top and an alert header in bold. He tapped it once, then held it just above the table, close enough that I could read the timestamp. 6:52 a.m., 4 minutes after 6:48. Grandpa spoke like he was reading from a ledger. This, he said, is an automated fraud alert. It hit my email at 6:52. 4 minutes after someone tried to initiate a deceased customer process under my name. My mother's voice went thin. That's not us. Grandpa didn't debate. He didn't raise his voice. He went straight to the line that mattered. It lists the submitting contact as... He paused, looked down, then said it with the kind of calm that makes guilt scream. My son's email. The kitchen felt smaller, like the walls had leaned in to listen, because my father wasn't just running his mouth on a call. He'd touched a system. And systems don't care about family. They care about logs. My father lunged for denial, loud and desperate. That's fake. He's showing you fake paperwork." Grandpa's eyes didn't blink. "It came from the bank," he said, "not from him." Then Grandpa leaned closer to the speaker and dropped his voice. Still calm, just colder. "Here's what's going to happen," he said. "At 9 a.m., I have an appointment at my attorney's office. He will be there, and this call will be played." My mother's breath hitched. My father tried to interrupt. "Dad, you can't. You're done talking," Grandpa said. A short, sharp pause followed, like my father couldn't process being silenced. My mother tried one last pivot, voice trembling in the most strategic way. "Dad, please. You're not well. You shouldn't be traveling. Let us handle it." Grandpa looked at me, then at the sealed envelope, then back at the phone. "I'm well enough to sign," he said, "and well enough to revoke anything I've ever given you." Revoke. That word hit the room like a door slamming shut. My father's tone turned ugly. "If you do this," he hissed, "you'll regret it." Grandpa didn't give him emotion. He gave him truth. "I already regret what I tolerated," he said. Then he looked at me and spoke quieter, like he was giving me the one instruction that mattered. "Put the call recording on." I tapped record. A little red timer appeared on my screen. Grandpa knew exactly what he was doing. He wanted their voices, the laughter, the certainty, the cruelty, frozen in time, because people like my parents rewrite the past the moment the future stops obeying them. My father realized it too. His voice changed instantly, suddenly softer, suddenly careful. "Dad, listen," he said. "We can talk in person. Don't do this in front of strangers." Grandpa's eyes stayed steady. "You already did it in front of strangers," he replied. "You did it at the bank." And then, for the first time since the call started, I understood the shape of what was coming. Oh, if they'd already reached into a bank and tried to start a death process under Grandpa's name. If they were bold enough to tell me he was dead while he sat alive beside me. If they were obsessed with keeping me away from an attorney. Then this wasn't the end of their plan. This was the opening move. My father paused, like he was calculating whether he could still win this with charm. "Let's handle this quietly," he said at last. Grandpa didn't answer. He only slid the sealed envelope a fraction closer to the phone again, like a reminder that quiet wasn't something my parents got to choose anymore. And as the red timer kept counting up on my screen, one thought rose in my mind, sharp and cold. They didn't just want me out. They wanted the truth unreachable. The red timer on my screen kept running, counting up like a heartbeat you couldn't ignore. My father's voice had gone careful, trying to soften the edges he'd already sharpened too far. He was talking about handling things quietly, about not involving strangers, about family. The same word he'd used like a weapon 5 minutes earlier. Grandpa didn't answer him with anger. He answered with silence, the kind that forces a man to hear his own breathing. Then Grandpa reached across the table and ended the call with one clean tap. No goodbye, no argument, just a hard stop. For a second, the kitchen was too quiet. I could hear the faint electrical buzz from the light over the sink and the small creak of wood as Grandpa shifted in his chair. My hands were still trembling, but my mind was clear in a way it almost never is when my parents are involved. Clear, because the pieces had fallen into a pattern I couldn't unsee: the 6:48 attempt, the 6:52 alert, the 7:12 call, and the way they'd both tried to steer me away from a lawyer like a dog away from a bone. Grandpa slid the sealed envelope toward me, then the manila folder. Then he set my keys beside them, lining everything up like items on a checklist. Keys. Folder. Envelope, he said. He didn't say it like advice. He said it like a plan. I stood up so fast the chair legs scraped the floor. "Okay," I managed. My throat felt tight, like I'd been swallowing glass for years and only now noticed. That's when my phone buzzed again, this time not a call. A notification I didn't recognize at first. Cabin camera, front porch motion. My skin prickled. The cabin was Grandpa's place up in Bridger Canyon, tucked into a stretch of pines and snow where the road narrowed and people only came if they belonged there. I tapped the alert. The live feed loaded in shaky bars, the image smearing as the signal caught up. For a few seconds, all I saw was gray and white and a blur of wood. Then it sharpened just enough for my brain to register what I was looking at. A man with a tool bag was kneeling in front of the lockbox mounted by the door. He wasn't Grandpa. He wasn't a neighbor. He moved with the steady, practiced motions of someone doing a job. Behind him, half in frame, half trying not to be, stood Trey Donnelly, my father's cousin. The one who always had a guy. The one who always talked about knowing how things worked, how paperwork could disappear, how the right phone call could make a problem go away. He was looking down the driveway like he was waiting for someone, or making sure no one else showed up first. My mouth went dry. "That's Trey," I said, and my voice came out smaller than I wanted. Grandpa leaned in beside me, eyes fixed on the screen. He didn't gasp. He didn't curse. He didn't even blink. He nodded once. Just once, small and controlled, like a man watching a trap, close exactly where he said it. "Record it," he said. I hit screen record. A red dot appeared in the corner. Proof on top of proof. On the feed, the locksmith shifted position, tried the lockbox again, then stood and gestured at the door like the lockbox was just step one. Trey motioned with his chin toward the cabin like he was done waiting. The man with the tool bag walked right up to the door. Something in Grandpa's face tightened, not fear, not panic. Offense. Like the audacity itself was what made his jaw lock. "People like that," Grandpa said quietly, almost to himself, "don't stop when paper fails." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a second phone. Not a smartphone. An old, no-nonsense kind of phone, the kind you kept charged for one reason: it always worked. He dialed a number that was already saved. A man answered on the second ring. "Sheriff's office. This is Gideon Rook." Grandpa said, voice steady. "I have a live camera feed showing an unlawful entry attempt at my cabin in Bridger Canyon. I'm alive. My son is falsely reporting my death, and there was an attempted death process initiated at my bank this morning under his email." The voice on the other end changed instantly. It wasn't just the name. It was the calm certainty in Grandpa's tone, the way he spoke like someone who understood procedure. "Mr. Rook," the deputy said, "where are you right now?" "On my way to my attorney," Grandpa replied, "but I need a unit dispatched to my cabin immediately." He gave the address from memory without looking at anything. Then he added one more line, crisp and deliberate. "I want the responding unit to note this. The death notification attempt was made at 6:48 a.m. Submitting contact was my son's email." "Understood," the deputy said. "We're dispatching now." Grandpa ended the call and looked at me. "We go to Hal first," he said. "We lock the paperwork. Then we go to the cabin. We lock the ground." I nodded because arguing felt pointless. Because he was right. A cabin could be broken into. A system could be manipulated. But if we got the legal filing in place first, my father couldn't outrun it with another phone call. I kept the cabin feed open as we moved around my kitchen, grabbing what we needed. Keys, folder, envelope, my phone, Grandpa's second phone. The sealed envelope stayed between us like something with its own gravity. On the feed, the locksmith's hand rose toward the door, and then faintly, so faint at first I thought it was camera glare blue, and red reflections began to flicker on the snow near the trees. The kind of light that didn't belong out there unless law enforcement was close. Trey saw it too. Even through the shaky frame, I could tell by the way his posture changed. He stepped back. His head snapped toward the driveway. He lifted a hand like he was signaling the locksmith to hurry up or stop something urgent. Something panicked. Grandpa stared at the screen without blinking. I swallowed hard, watching the moment stretch thin. Because suddenly this wasn't just my parents trying to erase me with a phone call. This was movement. Real time, real people, real crimes. And the worst part was how calm Grandpa stayed as he watched it unfold. Like he'd known all along the real fight wouldn't happen in my kitchen. It would happen at that cabin door. Grandpa drove even when I told him I could. He didn't argue. He just pulled his truck out of my driveway like the decision had already been made. The sealed envelope sat between us on the bench seat, my keys in the manila folder tucked close, and my phone propped in my hand with the cabin feed still running. I watched the locksmith step back from the door, watched Trey's head flick toward the driveway again, watched the red and blue reflections grow brighter. "Keep your head," Grandpa said, eyes on the road. "Keep the file." I didn't answer. I just sent the call recording into a separate folder on my phone and labeled it with the time 7:12 a.m. Then I emailed it to myself and to Hal Whitaker's office address that Grandpa had memorized like a safe combination. If my father wanted to make me look unstable, he wasn't going to do it by deleting a file from my phone. We reached downtown Bozeman while the sky was still that pale winter color that made everything look colder than it was. Hal Whitaker's office sat in a building that felt designed to keep emotion out. Glass doors, neutral carpet frame certificates, everything polished and beige enough that families could pretend they were civilized. Hal met us at the door like he'd been waiting. Not anxious, not chatty. Focused. His eyes flicked to Grandpa first, then to me, then briefly to the envelope and folder like he already understood those objects were the real story. "Mr. Rook," he said, and his tone was professional warmth with an edge of urgency. "I'm glad you're here in person." Grandpa nodded once. "He stays with me," he said, and gestured to me like it wasn't a request. Hal didn't push back. He led us straight into a small conference room, closed the door, and sat down without offering small talk. The printer hummed softly in the corner. A filing cabinet stood against the wall like a silent threat. Grandpa placed the sealed envelope on the table but didn't open it yet. First, Grandpa said, "I want it on record that I'm alive. I'm competent, and someone is telling people I'm dead." Hal's jaw tightened. "Okay," he said. "We'll document that immediately." I pulled up the recording and slid my phone across the table. 7:12, I said. "Speaker call. Both of them." Hal didn't just listen, he duplicated it. He asked me to airdrop it, then saved it into his system, then backed it up again. He wrote down the time he received it, like the timestamp mattered as much as the content. Grandpa watched him do it without speaking. That calm was starting to feel like steel. Hal turned to his computer. Now he said, "Tell me what happened." Grandpa didn't give a speech. He gave a timeline. "Bank alert at 6:52, Grandpa said. "Attempted death process at 6:48. Call at 7:12. And my cabin camera shows someone trying to break into my lockbox right now." Hal's eyes sharpened. "Your cabin camera," I held up my phone. "Live feed," I said. Hal didn't need to see it for long. He nodded once, then began typing fast. "I'm going to be direct," Hal said. "There was an inquiry this morning from Wade Rook." My stomach dropped, even though I'd been expecting it. Hal turned the monitor slightly toward Grandpa. He asked whether a death certificate had been issued, yet Hal said reading from the record and whether he could proceed with immediate estate administration. My mouth went cold. "He asked for a death certificate," I whispered. Grandpa didn't react like someone hearing a new horror. He reacted like someone hearing confirmation. "Of course he did," Grandpa said. Hal clicked through another screen. There was also an attempted change request, he continued, to update beneficiary contact information on 2 accounts. Grandpa's eyes narrowed slightly. "Which accounts?" Hal hesitated just a fraction, then said it. "The primary investment account," he said. "And the cabin property file." That was the moment the phone call snapped into focus. My father hadn't called to hurt me for sport, though he'd enjoyed it. He'd called to occupy my attention while he moved on the real targets. He wanted me emotional, distracted, loud, so he could label me unstable while he tightened his grip on everything that mattered. Grandpa reached across the table and slid the printed bank alert toward Hal. The fraud alert with the logo, the timestamp, the language that looked sterile until you realized it could erase a man with one click. Hal read it and his expression changed. "This is real," he said quietly. "This is a fraud alert." Grandpa nodded. "It came from the bank," he said. "Not from him." Hal leaned back. "There's more," he said. "This wasn't just phone calls and inquiries." He turned his screen again and I watched my own pulse jump as I saw what he was pointing to. "Your father attempted access to your grandfather's estate portal," Hal said. "He tried a password reset using an older security question." My hands went numb. How would he know that Grandpa answered before Hal could? "Because Celeste filled out my forms," he said. For years. The room felt colder, not because I was surprised my mother had been involved, because it meant their access wasn't new. It was built. A foundation laid quietly over time. Hal looked up at Grandpa. "Do you have any reason to believe they have physical documents with your signature?" he asked. "Or anything that could be used to impersonate you?" Grandpa's gaze flicked to the cabin feed on my phone. "Yes," he said, "and they tried to get more this morning." As if the universe wanted to underline his point, my phone buzzed again with another cabin alert motion, stronger this time. I opened it, and the feed showed chaos tightening sheriff vehicles in the driveway, now lights flashing against patches of snow like blue knives. The locksmith stood stiff. Trey moved backward, eyes wild, calculating the woods. Hal took a slow breath, then looked at Grandpa. "You need to file today," he said. "Immediately." Grandpa placed 2 fingers on the sealed envelope. "Now we open it," he said. He broke the seal with steady hands. No tremor, no hesitation. He slid out a notarized amendment and a second page that looked heavier, stamped formal. He read one line silently, then pushed it toward Hal. "I want this filed today," Grandpa said. Hal scanned it and his face went still. "This appoints an executor," Hal said. "Not your son." Grandpa nodded, "and it restricts Wade's access." Hal added, reading deeper. "Explicitly. Across accounts and property." "Yes," Grandpa said, "because I know him." Hal set the papers in a tray marked urgent. "Once we file, he warned your son will be notified. He'll know you moved." "Let him," Grandpa said. Hal studied Grandpa for a moment like he was measuring competence the way courts did not, the way families claimed to. Then he nodded. "All right," he said. "Next step, an affidavit stating you're alive and competent. We make it official." Grandpa didn't flinch. "Print it," he said. While Hal moved to his printer, I watched the cabin feed again. A deputy stepped out, one hand near his belt, posture controlled. The locksmith raised his hands. Trey didn't. Trey took 2 steps back, then another, trying to find an exit in the trees. My phone began to ring. "Dad." Wade's name glowed on the screen like a dare. I stared at it. Hal glanced up. Grandpa glanced at me, then at the phone, then back to Hal like he already knew the order of operations. Hal slid a printed affidavit across the table with a pen. "Sign," he said to Grandpa. Grandpa signed with clean, deliberate strokes, the kind that didn't leave room for doubt. The phone kept ringing. I expected Grandpa to tell me to ignore it. He didn't. He looked at the screen, then at me, and his voice dropped low, almost calm enough to be gentle. "Let's see what story he tries now," he said. The phone was still ringing on the table when Grandpa reached for it. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look at me for permission. He took my phone in his hand, turned on the speaker himself, and answered in the same calm voice he'd used all morning, the voice that made people reveal things without realizing they were doing it. "Yes." For half a second there was nothing on the other end. Not even breathing. Just the hollow pause of a man recalculating. Then my father spoke, suddenly softer, suddenly careful, like he was stepping onto thin ice. "Dad, thank God. I was so worried. I'm on my way to see you right now. We need to talk. Privately." Grandpa didn't rise to the emotion. He didn't reassure him. He didn't say thank you. About what he asked. The question landed like a hook. My father exhaled, then shifted direction, just like he always did when he couldn't dominate the room directly. "About him," he said, and I felt my shoulders tighten, even before he said my name. "He's manipulating you. He's isolating you. People are worried. People." That word was never about concern in my family. It was about authority by implication. An invisible crowd that somehow always agreed with my parents. Grandpa glanced at Hal, then back at the phone. At 7:12 this morning, Grandpa said evenly, "You told my grandson I was dead." My father laughed lightly, the same fake surprise he used when he thought charm could erase reality. "Dad, that's not what you did," Grandpa cut in, and your wife laughed. Silence stretched across the line, thick and uncomfortable. Then my father snapped. Fine, he said. You want the truth? We did it because we had to. We had to protect what's ours before he steals it. The words hung in the air like smoke. Hal's fingers froze over his keyboard for just a fraction of a second, then started moving faster. Grandpa leaned forward slightly. What is ours, he asked. The estate, my father said sharply now. The accounts. The cabin. The land. Dad, you don't understand how this works. If he gets involved, everything turns into a mess. Grandpa's voice didn't rise. He is involved, he said. He's sitting next to me. I watched my father lose control of his breathing. Not enough to admit fear, but enough to betray it. Dad, he said, switching again, voice suddenly pleading. Let's not do this through lawyers. I'll drive to you. We'll handle it as a family. You already chose lawyers, Grandpa replied. You chose the bank. At 6:48. Hal stopped typing. The room went still. What my father said. Grandpa didn't repeat himself. He waited. And that's when my father made the mistake that changed everything. The court is already involved, he said. The words slipped out too quickly, like they'd been waiting behind his teeth. Hal's hands stopped completely. Grandpa's eyes sharpened. What court? My father backpedaled immediately. Probate, he said fast. Standard stuff. Just making sure everything's in order. Hal didn't look up from the screen. He didn't say a word. That silence was louder than any accusation. After a few seconds, Hal spoke, voice lower than before. There is a filing, he said. I felt like the floor dropped an inch under my chair. My father heard it through the speaker and jumped in immediately. Don't listen to him, he barked. That attorney works for him. Hal ignored him and kept reading. Emergency petition, Hal said. Temporary guardianship. I felt the air leave my lungs. Guardianship. Not inheritance, not paperwork. Me. Hal continued reading aloud. The petition claims Mr. Gideon Rook is mentally incapacitated, vulnerable to exploitation, and being isolated from family. My father didn't deny it. He leaned into it. It's for his own good, he said. If he won't listen, the court will make him listen. Grandpa stared at the phone like it had turned into something unrecognizable. You tried to declare me dead at a bank, he said quietly. And when that failed, you tried to declare me incompetent. Hal scrolled further. There's a request for expedited hearing, he said. Today. Today. The word hit me like a blow. Hal opened the list of attachments submitted with the petition. There's a supporting statement, he said. Signed. He turned the screen slightly so we could see it. My name was on the page. Not my signature, but my identity twisted into a story where I was dangerous. Where I controlled Grandpa's medication. Where I restricted access. Where I manipulated him for financial gain. Grandpa wasn't on medication. Had never been. This wasn't confusion. This was construction. Hal scrolled to the bottom. Witness, he said. The name made my stomach clench. Trey Donnelly. At the same moment, my phone buzzed again. I opened the cabin feed. 2 sheriff vehicles were now in the driveway, lights flashing against snow and trees. The locksmith stood with his hands raised. Trey backed toward the woods, eyes wild. Grandpa leaned toward the phone one last time. You tried to kill me on paper, he said. When that didn't work, you tried to take my mind. He ended the call. 1 tap. Silence. Hal was already moving. Affidavit of life and competency, he said. Emergency response. Full evidence packet. I handed him everything, recordings, alerts, footage, while the printer screamed into action. On the cabin feed, a deputy bent down and picked something up from the ground. A folded piece of paper. He opened it. His posture changed instantly. I zoomed in until the pixels broke. The header was still readable. Temporary guardianship order. Draft. Hal didn't waste a second. He called the clerk of the court, directly identified himself, and spoke in the clipped, precise language that made it clear this was no longer a family dispute. We have an emergency response, he said. Evidence of attempted financial fraud, unlawful entry, and false statements submitted to the court. I need this attached to the file before the hearing. While he spoke, I transferred every file again, timestamps, recordings, screenshots, watching them upload like pieces locking into place. Grandpa signed the affidavit without hesitation. His handwriting was clean, steady, unmistakable. Hal looked at the signature, then at him. "They listed the cabin as your current residence," he said. I felt sick. "They're trying to tie control of you to control of the property," Hal continued. "They don't need a long case. They need a fast reaction." We left the office less than 15 minutes later. The drive up Bridger Canyon felt unreal. I kept the cabin feed open, watching deputies secure the area. The locksmith sat on the porch steps, pale and shaking. Trey ran and was tackled halfway to the tree line. When we pulled into the driveway, the scene was worse in person. Scratches on the lockbox, fresh marks on the door frame. Deputy Ransom Holt stepped forward the moment he saw Grandpa. "Mr. Rook," he said, posture shifting instantly. "Sir, you're alive." "Very much so," Grandpa replied. The deputy nodded once. "We recovered several items," he said. "A printed guardianship order draft, a USB drive, 2 folders marked bank and property." My chest tightened. The deputy added, "Your son called earlier asking if we could confirm your death. When we refused, he said paperwork was coming." Paperwork. Trey sat in cuffs near the truck. When asked who sent him, he hesitated, then cracked. "Wade," he said. The locksmith admitted he'd been hired by a family member to open the lockbox. I stood on the porch staring at the door like it had been wounded. Grandpa stepped beside me, then reached into his coat. The sealed envelope was still there. "Open it here," he said. My hands shook as I held it. "They tried to steal the ending here," Grandpa continued. "So this is where it opens." I looked at the clock on my phone. The hearing was getting closer, and for the first time that day I wasn't afraid. I was ready. Deputy Ransom Holt treated the porch like a crime scene, not a family mess. He photographed the scratched lockbox, the fresh gouges on the doorframe, the boot prints that didn't belong, the camera mount, the motion timestamps. He logged the locksmith's name, the tool bag, the call history on the locksmith's phone if he'd allow it, and the exact minute Trey Donnelly bolted for the trees. I handed Holt my screen recording and the lockbox tamper log, and I made him repeat the key times back to me when the alert hit my phone, when the first unit arrived, when Trey ran. I didn't want a story. I wanted a timeline. Grandpa stood close shoulders, square voice level. "Put this in your report," he told Holt. "Owner is alive. And there's proof someone initiated a death process at my bank under my son's email." Holt nodded and wrote it down. The folded paper the deputy had found earlier, the one that turned his posture stiff, sat on the patrol hood in an evidence sleeve now. The header was still visible through plastic. Temporary guardianship order, draft, not a court-issued order. A prepared ambush. Grandpa looked at me then, at the sealed envelope in my hands. "Open it here," he said. "Here." My voice came out thin. "Here," he repeated. In front of him. In front of the record. My fingers shook as I broke the seal. The crack sounded louder than it should have, like a branch snapping in winter air. Inside was a notarized amendment, clean, direct, built like a barricade. I held it so Deputy Holt could see the title and the notary stamp before I read. The document didn't dance around the truth. It named my father. Wade Rook. Restricted. Barred from initiating changes, accessing accounts, or presenting himself as decision-maker. It referenced attempted fraud as cause with dates and language meant to survive scrutiny. Then came the part that made my stomach settle in a hard, strange way, an immediate freeze provision. The executor named in the amendment had authority to contact the bank and any asset custodian and lock down access at once. No waiting. No "we'll review." No room for my father to sprint ahead with another urgent request. Deputy Holt read over my shoulder, eyes narrowing, then gave a short nod. "That's clear," he said. "Real clear." I kept turning pages until I reached the bottom. Grandpa's handwriting was there, dark ink, steady strokes. 2 lines, no speeches, no pleading. "If anyone claims I'm dead, call the sheriff. If anyone claims I'm incompetent, play the recording." My throat tightened. Not because it was poetic, because it was exact. Grandpa had predicted both attacks declare him dead, then declare him unfit, and he'd built the counter before they even moved. Deputy Holt asked for copies. I took photos, emailed them to Hal Whitaker, and noted the time, the recipient, and the case number Holt gave me. Every handoff documented. Then Holt's gaze shifted to the evidence bag with the USB drive they'd recovered from Trey. We did a quick look to identify contents, he said. Not full analysis. Just enough to understand what it is. He told us what he'd seen: folders labeled by date, drafts of statements, a checklist of steps. Not something typed up in panic this morning. Planning. Organization. And there's a template in there, Holt added, for bank communication. It references a deceased process. My skin went cold again. It matched the 6:48 attempt and the 6:52 alert like puzzle pieces clicking into place. There's also a narrative about you, Holt said, glancing at me. Same language as the guardianship filing your attorney mentioned on the phone. I exhaled slow, then texted Hal. USB appears to contain dated prep bank templates and drafted statements mirroring guardianship allegations. Sheriff has custody. Case number attached. My phone buzzed again. Not an alert. A call. Unknown number. For a moment, old reflex tried to rise, answer, defend, explain. Grandpa's hand touched my wrist, light but firm. From here on out, he said quietly, everything spoken has to stand up in front of a judge. I let it ring. By the time we left the cabin, the evidence wasn't scattered anymore. It had labels, timestamps, and custody. Deputy Holt had the draft order sealed, the USB bagged, the folders marked bank and property logged, the locksmith's statement recorded. Trey's admission, Wade sent him written down. Hal Whitaker met us at the courthouse with a stack of printed filings and a calm that felt earned. He had everything: the 712 call recording the bank fraud alert, with the 6:52 timestamp screenshots tying the attempt to Wade's email. The cabin footage, the tamper logs, the photos of forced entry, the draft guardianship paper recovered at the scene, and a written summary from the sheriff's office that Wade had called asking for confirmation Grandpa was dead and mentioned paperwork coming. Grandpa walked in beside us like a man stepping into his own house. Not fast, not frail, present. The hearing moved quickly because that's what emergency means when someone wants the court to act before the full picture exists. Hal didn't let it stay narrow. He built a straight line of time the judge couldn't ignore. 6:48 a.m. death process initiated at the bank. 6:52 a.m. fraud alert sent to Grandpa. 7:12 a.m. call claiming Grandpa died with laughter, and an instruction to keep me away from counsel. Later that morning, locksmith and Trey at the cabin, draft guardianship order printed and present, tools on the porch, forced marks on the door. Hal played a short piece of the recording, just enough. My father's cold announcement. My mother's laugh. Finally, you're out. Not grief, not confusion. Celebration. Then Hal laid out the bank alert and the submitting contact, then the cabin evidence, then the draft order found on site before any judge had ruled, then the sheriff's note about Wade calling to confirm a death that hadn't happened. Grandpa spoke for himself when asked about capacity. He answered cleanly. He named dates. He explained why he was here. He stated what he signed and why. He described the envelope he brought, the reason he told me to record, the reason he called law enforcement. He didn't sound coached. He sounded certain. When the judge asked why guardianship was needed today, Hal didn't argue emotion. He argued motive and method. A rush to seize authority before anyone could challenge it. The petition didn't hold up under its own weight after that. The claims about medication collapsed when Grandpa stated he wasn't on any. The claims about isolation collapsed when the timeline showed Wade wasn't shut out, he was moving behind systems trying to lock others out. The judge denied the emergency guardianship request. Hal then asked the court to note on the record that Grandpa was alive, competent, and acting of his own will, and that any future attempt to claim otherwise should be viewed in light of the documented bank attempt, the recorded call, and the coordinated activity at the cabin. The judge agreed to formalize what could be formalized. Afterward, Hal moved fast on the practical protections. He sent the notarized amendment and the freeze instructions to the bank and the investment custodian, and he placed restrictions on access tied to Wade and Celeste's names. He confirmed receipt. He confirmed the lock. In the quiet of the courthouse hallway, I listened to my parents' voices again in my head. The laughter, the certainty, the way they'd tried to turn me into the unstable obstacle so nobody would question their paperwork. Grandpa stood beside me and spoke like he was closing a chapter, not starting a war. They were right about one thing, he said. You get nothing from them. I swallowed, waiting for the sting. Then he added softer, you get your life back. Outside, my phone was finally quiet. No threats, no demands, just emails stamped received and filed, and a message from Hal confirming the freeze had been accepted. My father thought one call could erase me. Instead, it documented him.